For months, Melanie had been harassing her new black neighbor with false complaints and police calls. But her latest accusation would finally expose the truth about who the real threat was.
Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and a comment before we start to learn more about what happened.
The quiet suburban neighborhood of Maplewood Heights had always prided itself on being peaceful and well-maintained. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and friendly neighbors created the kind of community that appeared in real estate brochures. But beneath the surface tranquility, trouble had been brewing for the past 6 months. It all started when Darius Coleman moved into 1247 Oak Street, the modest two-story house next door to Melanie Foster. Darius was a 34-year-old software engineer who had saved for years to afford his first home in a decent neighborhood. He worked remotely for a tech company, kept to himself, and took pride in maintaining his property. Melanie Foster, a 42-year-old real estate agent, had lived at 1249 Oak Street for over a decade. She considered herself the unofficial neighborhood watch coordinator and had strong opinions about what kind of people belonged in Maplewood Heights. When she saw the moving truck pull up next door and watched a young black man directing the movers, her suspicions were immediately aroused. The harassment began within days of Darius moving in. First, it was complaints to the Homeowners Association about his lawn not being maintained to community standards, despite the fact that his yard looked identical to everyone else's. Then came noise complaints about his air conditioning unit running too loudly, even though it was the same model used by half the neighborhood. Melanie's complaints escalated when she noticed Darius working on his laptop in his backyard during nice weather. She convinced herself that anyone spending that much time on a computer must be up to something illegal. Her imagination ran wild with theories about hacking, identity theft, and other cybercrimes. The first police call came 3 weeks after Darius moved in. Melanie reported suspicious activity involving someone using electronic devices in their backyard for extended periods. Officer Rodriguez, who responded to the call, found Darius working on legitimate software development projects, exactly as he had explained. "Ma'am, your neighbor is allowed to use his computer in his own backyard," Officer Rodriguez had explained to Melanie. "There's nothing suspicious about someone working from home." But Melanie wasn't satisfied. Over the following months, she called the police 8 more times with various complaints. Darius was loitering in his own driveway while checking his mail. He was conducting illegal business when a delivery truck brought packages to his house, and he was casing the neighborhood when he went for evening walks. Each time, the responding officers found no evidence of wrongdoing. Darius was always polite and cooperative, providing reasonable explanations for his completely normal activities. The police reports accumulated, creating a paper trail of frivolous complaints that began to concern the department's community liaison officer. Darius tried multiple approaches to resolve the situation peacefully. He introduced himself formally to Melanie, hoping that getting to know each other might ease her suspicions. She slammed the door in his face. He offered to show her his home office to prove he was working legitimately. She accused him of trying to lure her into his house for nefarious purposes. Frustrated but determined to be a good neighbor, Darius even invited the entire neighborhood to a backyard barbecue, thinking that community integration might solve the problem. Most neighbors attended and found Darius to be friendly and normal, but Melanie stood at her window watching the gathering, taking photos and videos that she later claimed were evidence of gang activity. The situation reached a breaking point on a Tuesday morning in October. Darius was troubleshooting an internet connectivity issue that had been affecting his work for several days. The intermittent outages were causing problems with his video conferences and file transfers, potentially jeopardizing his relationship with important clients. He had contacted his internet service provider multiple times, but the initial diagnosis suggested equipment failure somewhere in the neighborhood's cable infrastructure. The company scheduled a technician to visit and examine the external connections to determine the source of the problem. The technician, Miguel Santos, arrived early in the morning with a van full of diagnostic equipment. He began by testing the signal strength at various points along the cable line that served Darius's house and several neighboring properties. What Miguel discovered was troubling. Someone had been deliberately tampering with the cable connections serving both Darius's house and several neighboring properties. The damage was sophisticated. Cables had been partially cut in ways that would cause intermittent failures rather than complete outages, making the sabotage difficult to detect without professional diagnostic equipment. "This isn't normal wear and tear or weather damage," Miguel explained to Darius. "Someone with technical knowledge has been deliberately sabotaging these connections. The cuts are too precise and too systematic to be accidental." While Miguel worked to repair the damage, documenting each instance of tampering with photographs and detailed reports, Darius noticed Melanie watching from her window with particular intensity. When he waved politely, still hoping to maintain neighborly relations despite months of harassment, she quickly closed her blinds and disappeared from view. An hour later, Melanie was on the phone with 911, making her most serious accusation yet. "I want to report my neighbor for hacking and cyber terrorism," Melanie told the dispatcher, her voice shaking with what sounded like genuine fear. "He's been tampering with everyone's internet connections, and now he has some technician helping him break into people's networks. I think he's stealing personal information from the whole neighborhood." The dispatcher, recognizing the address from previous calls, sighed internally but took the complaint seriously due to the mention of potential cybercrimes. "Ma'am, can you describe what specific activities you've observed?" "He's always on his computer, and now there's a van in his driveway with technical equipment. They're doing something to the cable boxes. I saw them cutting wires and connecting devices. This is identity theft, and probably worse." Detective Michael Torres was assigned to investigate Melanie's latest complaint. Unlike the patrol officers who had responded to her previous calls, Detective Torres specialized in cybercrime and took a more thorough approach to the investigation. Detective Torres arrived at the neighborhood and immediately noticed the internet service provider's van parked in Darius's driveway. He spoke first with the technician, who explained that he was repairing damage to the cable infrastructure that served the entire block. "Someone's been cutting cables and messing with connections," the technician explained. "It's deliberate sabotage, not equipment failure. Whoever did this knows how these systems work." Detective Torres then interviewed Darius, who provided documentation of his work-from-home employment, his internet service complaints, and the repair appointment. Everything checked out as completely legitimate, but Detective Torres's investigative instincts were triggered by something the technician had said about the nature of the damage. The sabotage showed technical knowledge that went beyond simple vandalism. Someone with networking expertise had been systematically disrupting service in a way that would be difficult to detect without professional diagnosis. "Mr. Coleman," Detective Torres asked, "do you have any idea who might have been tampering with the internet infrastructure?" Darius hesitated, not wanting to make accusations without proof. "I don't want to point fingers, but I've had ongoing issues with my neighbor, Mrs. Foster. She's made multiple complaints about me, and she seems very interested in my work activities." Detective Torres decided to interview Melanie next. When he knocked on her door, she answered eagerly, clearly expecting to provide evidence against Darius. "Thank you for coming, Detective," Melanie said, inviting him into her living room. "I've been documenting everything. I have photos, videos, and detailed notes about his suspicious activities." As Melanie enthusiastically showed Detective Torres her evidence against Darius, which consisted mainly of photos of him working in his backyard and walking in the neighborhood, the detective noticed something that made him pause. Melanie's home office contained sophisticated computer equipment, including multiple monitors, networking hardware, and technical manuals. For a real estate agent, it seemed like an unusual setup. "That's quite an impressive computer setup you have," Detective Torres commented casually. Melanie's demeanor shifted slightly. "Oh, that's just for my real estate work. You know, managing listings and client databases." But Detective Torres noticed that one of the manuals on her desk was specifically about network security and cable infrastructure. Another manual covered techniques for monitoring internet traffic. "Mrs. Foster, I have to ask, do you have any background in information technology or network administration?" Melanie became visibly uncomfortable. "I've picked up a few things over the years." "You have to be tech-savvy in real estate these days." Detective Torres's suspicions were now fully aroused. He excused himself and called for a cybercrime specialist to join him at the scene. While waiting, he conducted a background check on Melanie Foster. The background check revealed interesting information. Before becoming a real estate agent 5 years earlier, Melanie had worked for a telecommunications company as a network technician. She had been terminated from that position following allegations of using company resources to spy on customers' internet activities. When Detective Torres's cybercrime specialist arrived, they requested permission to examine Melanie's computer equipment. Initially, Melanie refused, but when presented with the possibility of obtaining a search warrant, she reluctantly agreed. What they discovered was shocking. Melanie's computer contained evidence of extensive illegal surveillance activities. She had been intercepting her neighbors' internet communications, accessing their personal emails, and monitoring their online activities for months. The investigation revealed that Melanie had been using her technical knowledge to hack into multiple neighbors' home networks. She had accessed personal financial information, private communications, and sensitive documents. Her targeting wasn't random. She had specifically focused on newer residents and anyone she deemed undesirable for the neighborhood. Most damning of all, they found evidence that Melanie had been the one sabotaging the internet infrastructure. She would deliberately damage connections, then monitor her neighbors' activities when repair technicians came to fix the problems. The disruptions provided cover for her to access networks while people were distracted by connectivity issues. Detective Torres confronted Melanie with the evidence. "Mrs. Foster, we've found extensive evidence of cybercrime on your computer. You've been illegally accessing your neighbors' private networks and communications." Melanie's careful facade finally cracked. "You don't understand," she said desperately. "I was protecting this neighborhood. Do you know what kind of people have been moving in? I had to keep an eye on things, make sure everyone was legitimate." "Mrs. Foster, what you've described is illegal surveillance and identity theft. You've violated multiple federal laws regarding computer crimes and privacy." As the investigation continued, the full scope of Melanie's activities became clear. She had accessed bank account information, read private emails, and even used stolen personal information to run background checks on neighbors she disapproved of. Her real estate license had given her access to additional databases that she had misused for her surveillance activities. The irony was inescapable. While spending months trying to prove that Darius was a cybercriminal, Melanie had been committing serious cybercrimes herself. Her obsession with her neighbor's activities had led her to engage in exactly the kind of illegal behavior she claimed to be preventing. Word of Melanie's arrest spread quickly through Maplewood Heights. Neighbors who had dismissed her complaints as overzealous community watch activities now realized they had been victims of serious privacy violations. Many discovered that their personal information had been compromised by someone they had trusted as a neighborhood advocate. Darius found himself receiving apologies from neighbors who had initially been suspicious of him due to Melanie's constant complaints. The Homeowners Association issued a formal statement acknowledging that they had acted on false information and extending a welcome to Darius as a valued community member. The legal consequences for Melanie were severe. She was charged with multiple counts of computer fraud, identity theft, and privacy violations. Her real estate license was immediately suspended, and she faced federal charges that could result in years in prison. During her court appearances, Melanie's defense attorney attempted to portray her actions as misguided neighborhood vigilance rather than criminal behavior. But the prosecution successfully demonstrated that her crimes were systematic, sophisticated, and clearly intended to harm others. Detective Torres testified about the technical complexity of Melanie's surveillance operation. This wasn't casual snooping, he told the court. Mrs. Foster used advanced techniques to penetrate secure networks and access highly sensitive personal information. Her actions represent serious violations of federal computer crime laws. The case attracted media attention as an example of how prejudice and paranoia could lead to criminal behavior. Legal experts used it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of vigilante activities in the digital age. For Darius, the resolution brought both relief and reflection. I never imagined that someone could be so consumed by suspicion that they would break the law to investigate their innocent neighbor, he said in a statement. I hope this case helps people understand the real harm caused by unfounded prejudice and false accusations. The neighborhood slowly began to heal from the revelation that they had been living next to a cybercriminal who had violated their privacy while pretending to protect them. New security measures were implemented, and residents were educated about protecting their home networks from unauthorized access. Melanie was ultimately sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to her victims for the privacy violations and identity theft. Her house was sold to cover legal fees and damages, and she was required to register as a cybercriminal upon her release. The case became a textbook example in cybercrime courses, illustrating how technical knowledge could be misused for criminal purposes and how prejudice could motivate illegal surveillance activities. It also highlighted the importance of proper investigation techniques in distinguishing between legitimate concerns and false accusations. 6 months after Melanie's conviction, Darius was elected to the Maplewood Heights Homeowners Association Board. He used his position to advocate for privacy protections and to ensure that future complaints about neighbors were handled fairly and objectively. The story served as a powerful reminder that assumptions about people based on race, appearance, or lifestyle could not only cause harm to innocent individuals, but could also blind communities to real threats hiding in plain sight. Sometimes the person pointing fingers is the one with the most to hide, and the greatest danger to a community can come from those who claim to be its protectors. In the end, Melanie's months of harassment and false accusations had accomplished exactly the opposite of what she intended. Instead of driving Darius away, her criminal behavior had exposed her as the real threat to neighborhood safety, and had helped Darius become a respected and valued member of the community she had tried to exclude him from.